The main hall of the Hanul Palace Hotel shone as if designed to impress even the most insensitive. Crystal chandeliers cast beams of golden light onto mirrored tables, transforming each champagne glass into a small beacon of wealth. The perfume of the female guests mingled with the orchestral music that filled the room with forced elegance, while reporters jostled for space among influential businessmen, politicians, and heirs to conglomerates who moved fortunes with a single phone call. This was no simple corporate event. It was a stage set to fuel the narrative of absolute power. At the center of this carefully planned scene stood Han Ji-won, CEO of the Hanul Group, a man whose presence seemed to shape the atmosphere around him. His calculated gaze swept across the hall with the confidence of someone who believes he controls people, destinies, and circumstances. Each of his steps carried the precision of someone who never errs because he does not admit the possibility of failure. When the master of ceremonies enthusiastically announced his name, Ji-won walked to the stage, adjusted his jacket and smiled, exuding the confidence of someone who believes he has overcome all of life's risks. He spoke of growth, of international expansion, of new contracts, and of how the future of South Korea would inevitably depend on his leadership. Cameras captured every word, every studied gesture, every calculated expression. However, that speech was not the highlight of the evening, but rather the prelude to something even grander. When he finished his corporate presentation, he leaned slightly toward the audience and announced that he had something even more important to reveal, something that would change his personal future. A female figure appeared beside the stage with synchronized movements, as if she had rehearsed each step. Dressed in an impeccable outfit, Choi Min-ah walked towards Ji-won, symbolizing the strategic union of two fortunes. He announced their marriage, as if signing an irrevocable contract. The audience applauded, flashes went off, and a celebratory atmosphere filled the hall. However, before the applause subsided, the doors slowly opened. A woman crossed the hall with a firm posture, without jewelry, without ostentation, holding an envelope that seemed heavier than any fortune present there. Ji-won recognized her, and blood drained from his face. If he was about to celebrate his victory that night, how will he react when he discovers that she has returned carrying evidence capable of destroying everything he has achieved? If this beginning has already affected you, imagine the impact of what's still to come. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like now so you don't miss any chapter of this story, because the next event could turn everything upside down. Before that frozen gaze on stage, before the public fall and the silence that tore through the hall like an invisible blade, there was something between them that seemed pure. A small, discreet, unassuming story that began as improbably as a destined encounter. 3 years before that luxurious night, Han Ji-won was not just the powerful CEO who controlled meetings and signed multi-million-dollar contracts with a simple stroke of a pen. He was a lonely man, trapped within a routine that turned money into shields and goals into walls. And it was precisely on a winter dawn, when exhaustion weighed heavily on their shoulders and the city slept under the biting cold of Seoul, that fate decided to intervene. The coffee shop where she worked was small, hidden among tall buildings and glass facades. The neon sign read, "Moonlight Coffee." Few customers showed up at that hour, but every day at 2 in the morning, the door opened and Ji-won entered, always with the same expression, exhausted but trying to appear whole. The first time she served him, nothing spectacular happened. No intense exchange of glances, no memorable phrase. Just a simple request. A black coffee, strong. She served the drink and noticed the silent way he stared into nothingness, as if carrying the weight of a world that no one else could see. What she didn't know was that this observed silence would turn into routine. He returned every night, always ordering the same coffee, always at the same time, always sitting at the same table. Seo Hana, 28 years old, he worked there to pay the bills and try to keep his dream of studying design alive. His smile was light and spontaneous, and there was a sincerity in his gestures that contrasted with the rigid posture of that man who seemed to have forgotten how to breathe calmly. The first conversation arose from a simple detail. One night, the rain began to fall too heavily, and the windows fogged up from the contrast in temperature. Hana put on a soft playlist to fill the room and blurted out, almost without thinking, "Rain makes the city more beautiful when we're not in a hurry." Ji-won watched her, as if someone had broken the bubble where he was hiding. From then on, small things began to happen. Discreet laughter, conversations about nothing, exchanges of glances that lingered millimeters longer than they should have. On days when the cold was biting, they shared an umbrella to the bus stop. On days when the city seemed too big, she talked about dreams, and he, without realizing it, began to believe again. It was during that simple period, without luxury, without cameras, and without an audience, that the two created something that no contract could control. Because before every tragedy, there is always a moment when everything could still have turned out right, but things begin to change just when she discovers something that transforms love into a burden and the future into a threat. The days that followed those meetings at the coffee shop were so natural that before they knew it, it was no longer just a regular customer and a friendly barista sharing casual conversation in the quiet of the early morning. Ji-won began to seek her out whenever he needed a break from the constant demands of the board and the pressure from his family. Hana, without realizing it, became his refuge, the only place where he didn't have to be flawless, calculating, or invincible. There he could exist without masks. Sometimes after her workday, they would walk to the Han River Bridge. She found it beautiful to watch the cars passing by like threads of light stitching together the city. Ji-won, on the other hand, found it beautiful to watch Hana, her way of seeing beauty in things he had never noticed before. It was on one of those nights that she spoke smiling, unaware of the weight of her own promise. "If I ever disappear, I hope someone will look for me, as if they were looking for a home." He laughed, finding it too poetic, and replied, "If you disappear, I'll find you. Always." At that moment, she believed him. At that moment, he believed her too. Months later, Hana discovered that something inside her was changing. Constant nausea, unexpected dizziness, and an emotional sensitivity that made any romantic song sound like a confession. The decision to buy the pregnancy test was accompanied by a racing heart and trembling hands. When the result appeared, 2 red lines cut across her vision, and she had to sit down to avoid fainting. The world seemed to grow and shrink at the same time. She cried not from despair, but from a kind of love that is born even before form exists. Excited and nervous, she spent the week planning how she would tell Ji-won everything. She wanted to make that moment a beautiful memory, something they would both cherish forever. She bought a small white envelope, placed the ultrasound inside, and wrote on the front, "Our future has arrived." On the chosen morning, she went to the Hanul group building. She took the elevator up, breathing deeply, repeating like a mantra that everything would be all right. The office door was ajar. She entered slowly, hoping to surprise him with the news that would change their lives. But she was the one who was surprised. There was another woman sitting on Ji-won's lap, in an intimacy that left no room for doubt. Choi Min-hana, the daughter of the company's largest shareholder, kissed him as if she already owned everything, him, the company, the future. When Hana dropped the envelope, he merely looked up, freezing at the sight of who was at the door. There was no regret. There was no explanation. There was no despair, just coldness. "You knew from the start," he said, "that I couldn't marry someone like you." The word "like" cut more than a blow. Hannah felt the promise shatter inside her. But what comes next is even worse. Because when someone tries to bury a mistake, fate digs with both hands to bring it to light. When the envelope fell to the floor, sliding across the meeting table until it stopped at the edge, a thick silence filled the room, as if the air had turned to concrete. Ji-won didn't. Bend down to pick it up, showed no surprise or curiosity, only observed Hannah with the cold gaze of someone who sees an unwanted nuisance and intends to eliminate it before it becomes a risk. Hannah tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. While her vision blurred with the tears, she struggled to hold back. Seated next to Ji-won until moments before, Minna crossed her arms in a victorious posture, displaying a smile laden with calculated arrogance, leaning in to whisper that she had already warned Hannah that he was not someone she could reach. Hannah took a few steps back, instinctively placing her hand on her stomach, as if trying to protect something she didn't yet have the courage to reveal. Ji-won walked to the door and opened it emotionlessly, stating that this should never have happened, that she couldn't show up at his workplace unannounced, as his family had a reputation to uphold. Hannah struggled to breathe as she said she just needed to talk. But he looked away, as if her mere existence bothered him. Hours later, she received a message asking her to meet him, and her heart, despite the hurt, believed that perhaps there was remorse. When he parked in front of Haesung Hospital, she imagined it would be a discreet place for them to talk, but he didn't turn off the car, nor did he look at her, only keeping his hands gripping the steering wheel while saying that they couldn't continue, that she deserved another life. Hannah replied that she only wanted to be with him, but Ji-won interrupted her, stating that she had misunderstood everything, as there had never been any plan, and that she had only been a convenient interlude in his routine. He left her out in the rain, and watching him leave, Hannah understood that she wasn't just being rejected, she was being erased. The question now is simple and unavoidable. What is born when a woman discovers she has nothing left to lose? The early morning hours stretched on as Hannah remained kneeling in the rain outside. The hospital, unable to comprehend how someone could abandon another person so easily. The lights reflected on the soaked asphalt, creating an almost surreal scene, as if the world had lost its colors and only the cold remained, penetrating her wet clothes to reach the depths of her soul. People hurried past, protected by umbrellas that created small bubbles of isolation, where the pain of strangers was not allowed to enter. Hannah tried to stand, but her body wouldn't obey, as if every muscle had been drained by that emotional blow. Her breathing became short, and her subsequent steps were unsteady, causing everything around her to become an indistinct blur of light and sound before collapsing to the ground. When she came to, she was no longer at the hospital entrance. She was inside a subway car, sitting on a bench near the door, the trembling of the tracks vibrating beneath her feet, and the metallic smell of the surroundings filling the air. Her last memory was the distant sound of cars and the rain in her eyes. Now, she felt a warm coat over her shoulders, and turning her head, she noticed an elderly woman watching her with silent compassion. With a thermos in her hands, she explained that Hannah had fainted and that her body needed rest, offering help without demanding answers or justifications. The subway continued to the final terminal in Busan, where the woman helped her off, carrying her bag and the crumpled envelope as if she were carrying something precious. In the following days at that stranger's house, Hannah experienced something she couldn't name: care without expectation, acceptance without self-interest. She left her cell phone off, ignored calls, and allowed the silence to erase traces of her previous existence. Ji-won didn't reach out, didn't ask, didn't remember. Disappearing was the only way to survive. And it was precisely in this invisible void that someone new would emerge, someone who would see Hana when even she believed she had disappeared from the world. The following days in Busan seemed to exist at a different pace from the rest of the world, as if life had slowed down so that Hana could finally breathe. She would wake to the sound of waves crashing against the rocks and the smell of sea air wafting through the windows of the small house where she had been taken in by Donna Eunji, a woman with a serene gaze who treated the pain of others with gentleness and respectful silence. Donna Eunji didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations or schedules. She simply prepared hot tea, put on clean blankets, and offered her presence, as if she knew that some wounds need space to find their own path to healing. One morning, however, Hana's body began giving her the signals she had been trying to ignore, and intense dizziness nearly caused her to collapse. Yoonji decided to take her to the community clinic where she volunteered. There, Hana met the doctor in charge of the consultations, a young man with a calm demeanor and empathetic expression, identified by his name tag as Dr. Kang Hyun-seo. He examined her carefully and, after reviewing the ultrasound, said she was pregnant, but that her extreme fatigue and emotional fragility indicated that her body and mind were trying to cry out for help. Hana looked away, trying to hide the mixture of fear, shame, and relief, but Hyun-seo didn't rush her into any answer. He simply handed her a handkerchief and maintained the respectful silence of someone who understands that some truths need to be accepted slowly. As the weeks passed, the consultations turned into conversations. Hyun-seo discovered her skill in drawing and encouraged her to transform her pain into creation, reminding her that her talent hadn't been taken away by abandonment. One afternoon by the sea, with the wind ruffling her hair, she decided she wouldn't be defined by rejection, nor by the scars she still carried. She filled out a prenatal form, and, when she reached the space for her name, she took a deep breath and wrote Seo Hanul. Hanul meant sky, and in that instant she understood that she was choosing to be reborn. While she was rebuilding her own life, someone in Seoul was beginning to lose control of theirs, and when the past returns, it doesn't warn you, it destroys. While Busan became a healing setting for Hanul, Seoul was heading in the opposite direction. The capital buzzed with announcements of corporate mergers, headlines extolling the meteoric growth of the Hanul Group, and at the center of it all, a figure whose presence inspired both respect and fear. Han Ji-won in business newspapers, he was described as the executive who turned numbers into power. Magazines captured his image with catchy headlines, and investors treated his name as synonymous with guaranteed profit. Every step he took seemed calculated to keep him on the climb to the top, as if nothing else existed beyond the next deal, the next meeting, the next victory. However, what the media didn't see was the price he paid for this rise, built on silences and renunciations. At first, Hana's absence was just a momentary inconvenience, something he chose to ignore as easily as he took off his tie at the end of the day. But as the months passed, he began to realize that she wasn't a distraction. She was a void. On nights when the office was completely silent and only the glow of the buildings reflected in the windows, Ji-won was consumed by involuntary memories. The sound of her laughter, the slight glint in her eyes when she spoke of her dreams, the way she saw poetry in things he had always treated as irrelevant. He tried to fill the silence with even more work. He attended social events, corporate dinners, and business trips, but it was as if something was out of place inside him. Sleeping became a challenge. In the few hours of rest he managed to get, he was tormented by confusing dreams in which he saw Hana walking towards him, but he could never reach her. He would wake up sweating, with the irritating feeling that he had left something incomplete, something profoundly wrong. Meanwhile, Minna tightened her grip. Her family pressured her to make the engagement official, arguing that strategic alliances couldn't be delayed by confused feelings or useless nostalgia. Minna smiled in public, but in private made it clear she wasn't there to lose. She wanted marriage, a company, power, and Jiwon, suffocated by obligation and the image he needed to maintain, yielded like someone who had forgotten his own desires. He even believed he was in control. He even believed the past had stayed where it belonged, buried. But the past never truly disappears when there's a truth waiting to be revealed. And while Ji-won was trying to protect his own crown, someone he thought he would never see again was about to return. Not to ask for anything, but to collect everything. And the reckoning will come not with words, but with an envelope containing proof of a life. Hanul's new phase came with something unexpected: recognition. After months working at the clinic and encouraged by Dr. Yoon Seo, she decided to participate in a portfolio contest for independent designers. Her illustrations, inspired by the landscapes of Busan and feelings she didn't dare confess even to herself, were noticed by a marketing director from a large multinational company. Without realizing it, her art began circulating in corporate meetings, sparking interest in places she never imagined she would be again. That's how the invitation to work as creative director on a major rebranding project came about. The email mentioned an international opportunity, a high-impact project, and a higher salary than she ever dreamed of. What the email didn't say was something essential. The company that was hiring was none other than the Hanul Group, the empire ruled by Ji-won. On the first day, she walked through the corporate corridors with a firm posture, like someone who had already learned to rebuild herself. She didn't yet know that she was treading on the territory of her own past. With each step, the elevator reflected her transformed face. Now there was conviction in her eyes, not innocence. No trace of the woman who had begged in the rain remained. The creative department was located on the 15th floor, a spacious room with windows that displayed the Seoul skyline like a living organism. Hanul introduced herself, received her name tag, and when she entered the room designated for organizing old company files, she took a deep breath, ready to begin another chapter. She opened boxes, analyzed folders, and threw away discarded campaigns. That's when he found out. A different box, small, white, no identification. Something about it made his hand tremble involuntarily, as if a cold wind had swept through the room. He opened the lid and found old documents from the previous administration. Most were irrelevant: drafts, unapproved projects, corporate memos, but at the bottom of the box there was an envelope yellowed by time. She recognized it immediately. It was the same envelope that had fallen on the floor in Ji-won's office. His heart raced violently. His hands, once steady, lost their confidence. He touched the envelope as if touching a ghost, and when he opened it, he saw the ultrasound, the one he could never deliver. The image was clear, even faded. The tiny body developing, the date, the proof. The past has returned with force, but not with pain. It has returned with purpose. At that moment, something changed inside her. There were no more tears, no desire for explanations. It was as if time had finally restored her awareness that not everything that was taken away needs to be returned to the aggressor. She held the ultrasound firmly and whispered, not to Ji-won, but to herself. He doesn't deserve to know, but he will learn. He looked at his reflection in the window pane, and for the first time, he didn't see fragility. He saw power. As she was putting the envelope in her bag, she felt her phone vibrate with an internal company notification. A must-attend event on Friday. A special announcement from the board. That's when she realized that fate wasn't just returning what had been stolen, he was providing the perfect stage, and when curtains open to reveal a hidden truth, no one is prepared for what will be exposed. The night of the event arrived with the grandeur of something predestined. The main hall of Hotel Hanul Palace, it seemed to have been built to stage silent tragedies and calculated victories. The crystal chandeliers reflected light so intensely that they transformed the surface of the tables into small golden lakes, and the coming and going of waiters with perfectly balanced trays created a subtle, almost invisible choreography. The guests, carried away by the excess of champagne, talked about investments, business mergers, and astronomical figures, as if they were all pieces on the same financial chessboard. Each face exuded confidence and privilege, and no one imagined that this night, planned to be the consecration of one man, was about to become the ruin of his reputation. Han Ji-won observed the hall with the eyes of someone accustomed to controlling the environment, predicting every step and anticipating any threat. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored to his body, and his expression conveyed the confidence of someone who believed he was in a position of absolute advantage. With each handshake, with each photo posed by the strategically positioned photographers scattered throughout the hall, he felt the world finally recognizing his triumph. Minna, radiant in a dress made exclusively for that night, maintained the posture of a woman about to conquer the most coveted prize of her life, the Han surname and the power it represented within high society. She walked with a practiced smile, as if being filmed by invisible cameras, ensuring that every movement conveyed perfection. As the master of ceremonies announced the long-awaited moment, the CEO's grand speech about the company's new phase and the announcement of his engagement, Hanul entered the hall discreetly, yet with such an intense presence that it seemed to pierce the air. She passed through the main door as if pulled by an inescapable force, and with each step, the acoustics of the place seemed to change, as if the world had decided to hold its breath. She wasn't wearing an extravagant dress or flashy jewelry, but her posture, her serenity, and the firm gaze she carried spoke volumes more than any artificial glow could convey. The envelope was in her hands, guarded like a truth that would finally find its voice. It was impossible to ignore her. It was impossible not to feel something tremble when she appeared. Hanul walked toward the stage with long, calculated strides, weaving through the crowd without haste, but also without hesitation. Each meter covered left, behind a layer of fear, a layer of pain, and a layer of silence. The entire hall seemed to bow to that moment that no one understood, but which everyone felt carried enough intensity to alter any pre-written narrative. She did not seek impulsive revenge, nor did she desire chaos. She only wanted to return the truth to the place from which it should never have been torn. When Ji-won spotted that silhouette walking through the audience, his facial muscles went limp for a moment. His smile vanished, as if erased with an invisible eraser. The microphone trembled slightly in his hands, and for a second, the man who had spent years cultivating his own empire found himself facing the one thing he had never been able to control: the consequences of the choices he had made. Hanul climbed the first step onto the stage, then the second, then the third. With each step, the illusion of perfection began to crack. And when she finally reaches the stage, the silence that falls isn't just discomfort, it's foreboding. Because what she carries in the envelope has the power to break more than an engagement. It has the power to destroy an empire. The moment Hanul stepped onto the stage wasn't marked by the sound of footsteps, but by an almost supernatural suspension of tension in the atmosphere. Ji-won remained motionless before the microphone, caught between the need to maintain his image and the impossibility of pretending nothing was happening. The audience, which seconds before had been intoxicated by glamour and anticipation, now seemed petrified, as if they had all been dragged into a scene that no one dared interrupt. Hanul didn't look away for a moment. She walked towards him with a calmness born not from the absence of pain, but from the certainty that the truth, when it finally finds its way, doesn't need to raise its voice to be devastating. Upon reaching the CEO, she extended the envelope with the same delicacy with which one delivers something sacred, and the gesture, so simple, produced an impact that surpassed any words. Ji-won looked at the envelope as if he were facing a radioactive object, something that threatened to corrode the image he had spent years building with blood and vanity. The audience, attentive and hungry for any slightest sign of scandal, discreetly leaned forward, trying to see more. Hanul kept her hand outstretched until he, reluctantly and with trembling hands, finally took the envelope. She didn't smile, didn't make a scene, didn't utter any impulsive accusations. Her posture emanated dignity, the dignity of someone who had already bled all she had to bleed, and now only needed to conclude an unfinished story. When he opened the envelope and held the ultrasound scan, the expression on his face underwent a slow and painful transformation. First, confusion, then astonishment. Finally, the silent horror of someone realizing that the past had a name, a form, and a heartbeat. The ultrasound slipped from his hands, sliding across the polished stage floor, and the impact of the fall reverberated like a sentence. It wasn't just an image, it was the memory of something he refused to see, the material record of a life he abandoned before it even began. Minna, watching the scene from the audience, stood abruptly, her face distorted by disbelief, anger, and the despair of seeing her future slipping through her fingers. The entire room reacted as if they had just witnessed the collapse of an empire. Hanul finally spoke, her serene voice piercing the hall like an invisible blade. "Congratulations on your engagement, Han Ji-won. I hope you can also congratulate the son you abandoned before he was even born." The shock spread like wildfire. Camera flashes exploded simultaneously, petrifying that instant in thousands of photographs that would make headlines. Minna rushed towards the stage, wanting to stop the catastrophe, but Ji-won remained paralyzed, his gaze fixed on the fallen image at his feet. Words. He had failed him. No speech could rebuild what he had destroyed with his own hands. People began to murmur, and the murmur turned to chaos. Hanul took a few steps back, maintaining the dignity that had disconcerted him from the very first second of that scene. She hadn't come to ask for anything. She had come to return what was hers, the truth. And while the room seethed with shock and embarrassment, a certainty formed like a silent earthquake beneath Ji-won's feet. His downfall was only beginning. Because when the truth is exposed before everyone, the next blow doesn't come from the past. It comes from the consequences. And what is about to happen will be even more devastating than this revelation. The ultrasound incident's repercussions weren't confined to the auditorium. In less than 20 minutes, photos of the envelope that fell on stage and Ji-won's desperate look had already spread across cell phone screens, messaging groups, and corporate gossip forums. Hanul's phrase echoed in the headlines like a decree, "The child you abandoned before he was even born." From that moment on, the perfect narrative that Ji-won had tried to build with money and influence began to crumble from the inside out, like a glass castle struck by a single stone. The scandal spread like wildfire, fueled by oxygen and resentment. The following morning, no editor showed him any mercy. Newspapers splashed his image across the front page, highlighting not his achievements, but the cruelty with which he had discarded a pregnant woman. Business blogs commented that if he was capable of abandoning a child, perhaps he was also capable of abandoning shareholders and commitments. On social media, hatred intensified. Comments accused him of being the perfect example of a man who believes that power authorizes him to crush anyone who doesn't meet his interests. The company phone rang incessantly, but it wasn't investors requesting meetings. It was reporters demanding explanations. That same day, an emergency meeting was convened at Haneul Group headquarters. The atmosphere in the room was no longer one of reverence for the CEO, but rather of judgment. The shareholders, until then silent allies, now stared hard, like predators smelling weakness. Minar's family, enraged, ordered the engagement contract to be broken immediately, and her father made sure to publicly state that Ji-won had been warned not to get involved in romantic scandals. The engagement, which should have solidified alliances, turned into a public breakup that shattered his credibility. Previously, Ji-won was considered a pillar of the company, but now he was seen as a financial risk. One shareholder held up the minutes of the meeting and declared in a firm voice that the board could not allow the conglomerate's image to be dragged through the mud because of a personal mistake by the CEO that became an institutional problem. Another added that international investors were withdrawing proposals because they did not want to associate their names with a scandal involving abandonment and emotional abuse. "You put the empire at risk," Minar said, her gaze dull as someone who realized that neither love nor contract could save it this time. Within minutes, the vote was unanimous. Ji-won was removed from his position as CEO. When he left the building, there were no security guards, photographers, or red carpet. Just glass doors that closed behind him with the icy sound of a goodbye. His world, which had once been synonymous with absolute power, was now nothing more than an overwhelming weight of inevitable consequences. And at that moment, he understood what it means to lose everything without having anyone to support him. Days had passed since the fall, and Ji-won began to experience something he had never felt before: silence. Not the comfortable silence that accompanies peace, but the silence that betrays absence, emptiness, and regret. Without commitments, without ties, without a team. To follow his orders, he discovered that silence can be deafening when one is alone with oneself. It was in this abandonment that he realized the extent of the choices he had made. He realized that he had not only lost a position, a reputation, or an engagement. He had lost the only person who truly saw his humanity even before he knew what to do with it. And only when life took away everything he considered important did he realize that none of it had value without someone to share it with. Driven by this weight on his chest, Ji-won decided to go to Busan. There were no bodyguards or driver, just him, the train, and a small suitcase. The journey seemed too long for someone accustomed to controlling time, but he knew it was no longer the physical distance that separated him from Haneul, but rather all the choices he had made over the years. When he got off at the station, he walked towards the sea, guided by a vague memory of the description of a small house near the rocks. Each step seemed heavier, as if the ground itself was trying to punish him for what he had taken so long to see. Upon arriving, he saw Haneul with her back to him, sitting on the sand with her son in her arms. The breeze stirred strands of her hair, and the scene held a peace he had never been able to offer. He approached slowly, as one who fears disturbing something sacred. When she turned, there was no hatred in her gaze. There was serenity. There was finality. There was freedom. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him before it even formed. "I didn't come to ask for your forgiveness," he finally said, his voice breaking, "because I know I don't deserve it. I came to thank you for loving me when I didn't yet know how to love anyone." Haneul took a deep breath, holding her son gently, and replied with a gentle firmness, the same firmness of someone who has learned to rebuild her own life with her own hands. I didn't go back to the past, Ji-won. I went back to his future. He lowered his head, accepting what he should have understood from the beginning. Losing Hanul hadn't been an accident of fate, but a direct consequence of the choices he made. Some endings aren't cruel, they're fair. If you want the continuation of this story, comment continues here in the comments. And so you don't miss the next episodes, subscribe to the channel now. Each story is more intense, exciting, and shocking than the last.